What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sofie and I'm a barber, and I love covering all the little details in between because I've always been obsessed with technology and just understanding how it works. So I'm really happy with the last couple of videos. You guys have responded really well to just the little details and specs and facts that most people don't really cover. So I'm excited to go over a whole new set, very common questions a lot of people ask that I'm going to be answering today. Now, when it comes to tools, I know there's like so many specs already for the tool itself. People may have no idea what it means. Things that I've learned along the way, things that I was going through when I first started to now to understanding why things worked a certain way. Just some quick, like kind of random Snapple facts for the clipper world that I hope will allow you guys to also understand in further depth what goes into these things and what to look for. Things that you're going through with your personal tools that maybe you need help with, or you want to understand why it's doing certain things. You came to the right place. What I will be using today to demonstrate is the Custom FX. This is my newest build. This is my second one so far. Babyliss Pro recently launched this earlier this year in January. Before COVID happened, we had these labs that were at these hair shows. And what was really cool is that, you know, in the past you find certain tools that you like, but they're a certain colorway, and this was the first time you were able to customize your very own clipper the way you like. So my first custom effects that I created, if you guys seen it before, it was the Wolverine colorway that I built over at that hair show itself. So a couple new colors just recently came out, and that's why I had to do this all gray matte body. Gray is my favorite color. If you watch one of my recent videos, I did drop a tip on how you get a special colored button. And the way to do that is, and I'll say that again, is that once you purchase and build the clipper the way that you want it, you're going to screenshot your order number and your button color that you want, and you're gonna send that to Dennis Joseph Babyliss, and he will help you out with that and make adjustments. So that is the secret tip to getting this changed out with the specialty color. Let's start with the first things first. Back when I started cutting hair, something that I was going through was, if you were working in a barbershop, you're doing so many cuts all day, right? Your blades eventually get hot. And if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to put that hot blade onto their scalp, especially if you were only using one tool at the time. Roughly, I'm not sure if you guys seen it, but if you guys check back to my other video where I talk about all the different clippers I've used in the past, you'll understand kind of like the brands that I was using, the types of blades that they had. What would happen was, if you weren't careful or you had Cool Care to spray over the metal blade, that was a way for you to cool down the blade as you were working. If you guys remember that, the Cool Care spray would actually take the heat out of the blade a little bit, cool it down just a smudge so that you can continue working without it being so hot. Over time also too, I started to check on the back of my hand. I'm like, okay, let me see if this is too hot. And I would use that as a guide to make sure that my blades weren't blazing hot. Eventually, it got quickly to a point where, you know, I was so obsessed with the different tools that I started to buy multiple ones. So the reason behind using multiple clippers and tools at once was that you always had something to switch out of, which also really helped with the blade not getting hot as often because you're always using a different one. And the same way that a hairstylist would use shears, you know, you have so many types, so many texturizing shears, so many different types of combs for different types of things that you use. In the barbering world, we're used to having multiple clippers, multiple trimmers. Everything kind of serves its own purpose. So for example, the X2 clipper. The X2 clipper that I'm showing you right over here, this is my guideline creator. So when I'm working through a haircut and I wanna move through the hair really quickly and create my guidelines, this is the tool that I prefer to use, and that's kind of my purpose for that. And as you move into multiple tools and everything like that, you always end up using it for different things. Some people have a fade blade like this one here. Some people have a taper blade, and you give it a purpose. You give it meaning, you give it, okay, I'm gonna use this for this. So this one, for my fade blade, I set my guidelines with my X2, and then I use the fade blade to do all my blending in between my guidelines. So once I have everything set, this is usually the tool that's gonna allow me to blend everything in between all of my guidelines. Okay, let's cover the next part. Fast forward to today, there's new technology, there is really great feedback that the Babyliss Pro team currently and has been doing since I've been on the team, is that we test all these different things and we give the company feedback, and we all work together to make newer, better things that will help not only us, but all of you guys who are using these items. And something that I really, really love, going off of the first thing, is when you are working in a barbershop and you are doing so many cuts and your blades are getting so hot, then we started doing something where there was a coating on this blade. So if you guys have already used the FX series, compared to what I started with in the past, all of those other silver stainless steel blades would get so hot, right? These are all coated. Any of the Babyliss FX clippers, they all have a coating that keeps this cooler even longer. So if I am using this all day, and say I am using one, the likeliness of this getting as hot as it used to on those earlier models of clippers is night and day for me. I can get it to a warm state, but I've actually not experienced getting super blazing hot that I remember. That's something that I literally gravitated toward. I was like, wow, that is insane, because I remember how hot they would get, that I would have to kind of stop and take a break and just kind of talk to my clients sometimes to just kill the time a little bit, just so my blades could cool down. But now I don't actually experience that anymore since we have the coating system on all the blades. So that is another plus. I don't know if you guys noticed, but that is actually a thing. Another thing that's super important, let's go into the next part. Okay, this is an important one. The next part I want to go into is RPMs. When you buy clippers, I don't know if you guys notice, RPM speeds are sometimes listed on the box, or if not, you can sometimes look it up as well and find out which clipper is what. So if you refer back to my other video episode, I can't remember which one it was, but it's about all the different clippers that I've used in the history of my career. When you're in school, they don't really teach you the specs. That's just something I did, just outside research and just, you know, getting into all of that techie stuff. But basically what happened was, I remember specifically, if you guys remember the wall balding clipper, I was using that, and maybe you guys have experienced this with that clipper or maybe something similar, but that's the one I remember fresh out of my head. Is I was using that way back, and that clipper is only for balding. There's no lever attachment or anything. It's just to take the hair down to skin as possible. It's literally like a trimmer, but a clipper version, right? I'm going through the hair, but at the same time, I was noticing there was specks of follicles that were being plucked out of the hair. And I was like, what is going on? Am I applying too much pressure? I don't know. The blades are super sharp. Like, I couldn't figure out what it was. Years down the road, I started learning about RPMs. And what that means is the RPM of that clipper at that time, or a few that I was using during that time, is that the RPM controls the speed of the inner blade, right? That's gonna be the speed of whatever it moves to, and it's different for every clipper depending on what type of motors and all that kind of stuff. So what happened was with that clipper is that it was moving at a certain speed, like as fast as it could, but I was too fast with it. So it couldn't keep up with how fast I was actually moving. When that happens and you are moving faster than what the blades can handle, that's when you get the hair pulling. That's when you get the hair tugging. That's when it jams with the hair sometimes because the RPMs are not keeping up. So once I heard that, it literally solved so many of my questions that I had for such a long time because I couldn't understand why it was happening. But that is your answer for why the hairs are plucking out or any of those situations, because the RPMs on those clippers are running slower than your actual hand stroke. So if anything, the best way, if you do have one of those tools that run at a lower RPM speed, is that you're gonna have to just move a little slower with your strokes as you're cutting, or it's gonna keep pulling the hair and jamming up in your clippers. This particular model, starting with the gold FX clipper that you guys seen, it's been out for like maybe 2 years, I think now. When I looked up the wall balding, it said that it ran at about 6,000 RPMs. I don't know if that's the newer model or if that's really the same as the older model, but when I looked it up this morning, it said 6,000 RPMs, which, you know, the faster the better. But there's pros and cons that I'm gonna go over as well. So for this tool in particular, I'm actually not sure. I gotta double check with Dennis, but the gold, for example, gold, rose gold, those run at 9,500, RPMs. So you can kind of see the difference now, which means that blade is going so fast, nothing is going to stop it, which is really great. But here's the downside of also super high RPMs is that the motors will get hotter the higher they run, right? Than something that runs at a lower speed. But at the same time, we countered that with the coating on the blade, so it literally is the best of both. Another thing to keep in mind, I mean, this could be 9,500 as well. 9,500 RPMs, I will double check with that. But regardless, if it's over 6,000, that is a good sign. You want something that runs fast, but also keep in mind, if it doesn't have the coating blades and you are running a machine that is over 7,000, you best believe why those blades get so hot. Maybe it was the magic clip, I'm not sure, but there was something on the box that I remember when I used to buy, and the RPMs that were on the box were higher than 6,000. I wanna say it was closer to like, I don't know, 7,000, maybe 7,500, but they were the old blades, the old silver blades that didn't have the coating, and I remember it would get so hot. So that is another thing you have to think about. Keep those things in mind. Now, we're gonna go into the next part. So hopefully that has answered some of you guys' questions about, you know, why your hair is, why it's pulling hair. Okay, so the next thing I wanna talk about is guards. Guards are a huge thing, and this is why I wanted to talk about this in particular. So when you buy clippers, you have the comb attachments, right? And when you put this on, it just snaps right on, right? It's great, everything like that. The question that people have for a long time, I was wondering the same thing, but if you guys know about zero gapping tools, and if you don't know what that means, if you look back at my older videos on here, on YouTube, Instagram, IGTV, you can find it anywhere. I do zero gapping videos all the time, just to pretty much bring my blades closer together so that I can get it as tight as possible. So when I am using a trimmer and doing bald skin fades, everything connects as close as possible. Okay, so you get guards, and a lot of people have questioned why it rattles when they put on their guards and they're closing the clipper all the way down, right? Closing the clipper all the way down to where it is the shortest length, they feel like it is biting the guards. And what happens is when they make these guards, they're not making these to be compatible for zero gapping. Zero gapping wasn't even a thing until I learned about it. Like, I didn't even know tools were supposed to be zero gapped or anything like that. That way it can connect to the next piece a lot smoother. So this will connect into your trimmer, then your trimmer will connect into your foil shaver. So you want to get it as tight as possible so everything aligns. So the zero gapping for me didn't actually come until about maybe my second year in the barbershop, because I just never knew about that. And then we started tweaking them and getting them as close as possible, but of course, and then what would happen is because you are adjusting them closer, that is why you get a rattle from the teeth being in here, because the clipper is not, the factory set clipper is not set so that it's zero gap, because oftentimes people do cut clients. It's better to be safe than sorry. So they allow people to zero gap them afterwards. So when you are using a clipper without a zero gap and you close it all the way down, more than likely it's not gonna hit that end piece. And it's just that little tip of the inside that is rattling. So when you do zero gap them and it's on open, you're not gonna get that rattle until you close it all the way, and then you can start hearing it like kind of grind down. But my advice for that is that if you are using zero gapped tools, you got to get used to the grinding noise until eventually you use it so much that it will kind of just eventually soften and kind of like almost like shed that layer so that it fits better. Negative side about that as well is that eventually these can get loose and then you just got to replace them, but that's there's not really any other way around it. I've never had an issue with it. I would just get a new set of guards and call it a day. I don't know if every single person out there zero gaps their tools, but for the most part, I think most people do if they are working with really tight skin fades. And then if you have something else for that, and maybe you don't have to do that, but it's definitely required in my life. All my tools, trimmers, all my clippers, everything is zero gapped. Not to the point where they're overlapping or completely even. I do have a little bit of space, I would say like a hair strand, that I don't adjust past. And that's just my preference and just to be safe. Now that you guys kind of know why, just give it some time. Give it some time to use while you have it zero gapped and just let it grind down a little bit, and eventually the sound won't be as crazy and it'll soften up. And also keep in mind too, if you are getting any of these crazy colored clippers, you gotta remember these obviously all painted, so you gotta treat it kind of like a car. If you're gonna ding it into anything else, it's gonna have natural wear and tear. So that's kind of why you wanna really protect it and put it in sleeves. I don't really throw my tools around as much as I used to. So I'm always a little bit more cautious when they are a little colored, to just be careful where I pack them or put them into, just so they can preserve the color as best as possible. Okay, well, enjoy the rest of the video on the maintenance and oiling. I'm just going to talk about some maintenance on tools, and it's just some proper ways to clean your tools. This right here in particular is a graphite blade. And with graphite blades, the one thing that is really great about these blades is that they are almost self-lubricating. So what that means is if you're cutting for a really long time, because of the blade material and how they are moving against each other, they don't get as dry as typical silver blades, as typical metal blades. In the past, I have used clippers where if I'm doing a couple haircuts, I can feel the blades getting dry to where they're going through the hair and actually not cutting it. It kind of slides through sometimes. So that's kind of why a lot of times we oil and we lubricate the blades, because then it's gonna move a lot better. But another thing to think about too is if you over oil blades, the hair can get stuck in between really bad. In the past, when I used to use other blades that would get dry, I would over oil sometimes, not knowing, and I would do it too much. That when you are oiling blades, make sure your blades are not standing up to where the oil can run into the motor. Make sure when you do oil, everything is face downwards. So the same way that I would spray or oil if you must. Don't oil because you think that's the issue. Oil because you feel the blades are getting dry. And I've been using Babyliss tools now for the last 4 years, and I actually have not had any hair jam situation anymore. And I think honestly, it's because I don't oil all the time and I only oil if I need to. So for example, when I'm spraying in between customers, right? You always want to do that. I always face it downward and I spray. But everything is always facing down. And that way, if a lot gets in there, it's going to run down the blade and out, versus this way when you're gonna run it inside the motor. Same thing I do with my trimmers especially. And I remember back in the day I was using clippers and I had to use clipper, what's it called, clipper side or something like that, where you pour a bunch of liquid into a cap and then you dip your blades and let it run, and then usually it knocks out all the hair. That comes from a lot of buildup too. So if you do some basic maintenance every time you cut hair, you're not gonna get any jam. I have not had that jam problem in a really long time. So again, trimmer blades, same exact story. You wanna face them downward. Spray it there, and I spray the outside. Let it run for a little, and then usually I just kinda wipe them off if there's any extra. Once they're kind of dry and they don't look super wet, then I would put it back down on my station. Another thing too is when you are working and you're cutting hair all day, I have a pretty good habit that I've built where I'm always dusting off the blades, because that kind of helps also the hair from jamming over after so many clients. So every in between that I get a chance, I'm always dusting these off and just pushing the hair off, because that way it doesn't help the buildup. Another thing too is I really try my best not to cut on wet hair, because that's also gonna create a lot of jam, because when you are cutting with wet hair, it does slide in further. If I do wet the hair, I usually blow dry the hair first before I actually go into clipper cutting. I know it is possible that you can cut hair with any of these clippers, wet or dry, but preferably if you keep it on more of the dry side, you're gonna avoid a lot of the hair getting stuck in the middle. And the only way I was able to get the hair out from in the middle, like that space right there, I don't know if you guys can see it, the only way I was able to push hair out of there is if I had to take all the the blades apart, or get the computer duster spray. I used to spray it in between, or if you work in a shop that has those air compressors, you can usually blow the hair out. But other than that, if you don't have those type of things nearby, I would definitely recommend making sure that you're always cutting on dry hair, just for the sake of not getting anything stuck. I hope you guys enjoyed this video very much. I love all the tech stuff, so I probably will always keep you guys updated on anything that's new. You guys already know the deal. Leave any comments, leave me some feedback, like, share this with anybody you think that needs more information about this stuff. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.